The cafeteria went silent. That's what I remember most. How 300 voices just stopped at once. I stood there holding my lunch tray, completely frozen, while Tyler Brooks played the recording for everyone to hear. My voice filled the entire room, raw and vulnerable, speaking words I'd practiced privately in drama class about loneliness and feeling invisible. Words I thought were safe. Words I thought nobody would ever hear. Tyler added his own commentary over my monologue, mocking every single emotion, every vulnerable moment. His girlfriend Amanda stood beside him, clutching her chest dramatically, fake crying with exaggerated movements. The laughter started small at first, then grew like a massive wave crashing over me. My face burned hot with shame. My hands shook uncontrollably. I wanted to disappear completely, to sink through the floor and never return. Brandon started a slow clap that spread through the crowd like wildfire. 300 students watched me break apart. Hello everyone, and thank you for being here. Before the story continues, take a second to tell me where you're watching from in the comments. Here we share true-to-life revenge stories where the ignored, humiliated, and betrayed rise quietly and make it count. I truly enjoy seeing how far these stories travel and hearing from you directly. One important note: some elements in this story have been fictionalized for educational and storytelling purposes, and any resemblance to real people or settings is coincidental. That being said, the message I'm sharing is meaningful, and I hope it speaks to you. Mrs. Patterson finally confiscated Tyler's phone, but it was already too late. The video was spreading online, going viral within our school. By the end of lunch period, hashtags about me were already trending throughout school. Students I'd never even met suddenly knew my name, knew my private thoughts, knew my deepest vulnerabilities. My name is Maya Webb, and this is the story of how public humiliation became my greatest teacher. Before that Wednesday morning, I was nobody particularly special, just another sophomore at Riverside High trying to survive each day. I wasn't popular or athletic or charismatic. I liked reading and writing poetry, which apparently made me a perfect target for people like Tyler. I'd always been the quiet type, the kind of kid teachers called thoughtful and introspective, but other students called weird or dramatic. My older sister Claire was the confident one in our family, the successful one everyone admired. She worked in digital marketing and always knew exactly what to say in any situation. I envied that natural confidence she possessed. I spent most days trying to avoid any attention whatsoever, eating lunch alone by the windows, walking through hallways with my head down and earbuds in. I genuinely thought if I stayed invisible enough, I'd be safe from people like Tyler. I was completely wrong about that. Tyler and his friends noticed me anyway, singled me out specifically. Maybe because I seemed like an easy target. Maybe because cruelty always needs victims to sustain itself. They'd make small comments in passing. Nothing major enough to report, but constant enough to wear me down gradually. I spent the rest of that day hiding in bathroom stalls, splashing cold water on my burning face between classes, trying desperately to compose myself. In 5th period, someone whispered, attention seeker, loud enough for me to hear as I walked past their desk. In 6th period, a girl I barely knew asked if I was okay, but her eyes held pity rather than genuine kindness. After school finally ended, I walked home instead of taking the bus, needing the cold November air against my burning cheeks. At home, I locked myself in my bedroom immediately. My mom knocked twice, gently asking about dinner. I told her I wasn't hungry, that I just wanted to sleep. I lay on my bed, staring at the ceiling for hours. The hurt inside me felt simultaneously sharp and heavy, cutting and crushing me at the same time. Part of me wanted to tell my parents everything, but the shame felt too overwhelming to speak aloud. I could hear my family eating dinner downstairs, their voices muffled through the floor. Normal life continuing, while mine had completely shattered. My phone buzzed constantly with notifications, messages from unknown numbers, people sharing the video, adding their own cruel commentary. I turned my phone off completely, unable to face the digital cruelty that matched the real-world humiliation. In the darkness of my room, I felt more alone than ever before. That night, lying alone in my dark room, something fundamental changed inside me. The pain began transforming into something sharper, clearer, more focused than before. I sat up abruptly and opened my laptop with sudden determination. I wasn't going to hide from this. I wasn't going to transfer schools like every instinct was screaming at me to do. I was going to give them exactly what they wanted, but completely on my own terms this time. If they thought I was someone to laugh at, someone weak and pathetic, I'd become someone they absolutely couldn't ignore anymore. I stayed awake all night researching everything I could find. Social dynamics and group psychology, viral content creation strategies, psychological manipulation principles. Claire had an entire bookshelf of digital marketing books in her room. I snuck in and read 3 complete books that night, taking detailed notes on everything. I learned that authenticity could become strength when wielded correctly, that the most powerful stories throughout history came directly from pain and suffering, that vulnerability, when carefully controlled and intentionally shared, created genuine human connection unlike anything else. By dawn, I had a plan forming in my mind. Thursday morning arrived, and I returned to school with a carefully constructed plan. Tyler and his cruel friends fed off specific reactions: anger, tears, fear, embarrassment, defensive behavior. So I made a calculated decision to give them absolutely nothing they expected from me. When Brandon deliberately tried to trip me in the hallway between classes, I simply stepped over his extended foot smoothly and kept walking without breaking stride. The complete confusion on his face was absolutely priceless to witness. During lunch period, Amanda made another snide comment about my dramatic performance from the day before. I smiled genuinely and thanked her sincerely for the constructive feedback. Her confident smirk faltered immediately. She didn't know how to respond to that unexpected reaction. Melissa whispered something urgently to Tyler, who looked visibly annoyed and frustrated. They were completely used to victims who either fought back with anger or retreated in shame and silence. I was doing neither of those expected things. That same afternoon, I stopped by the school newspaper office. I'd always been genuinely interested in journalism and writing, but never had the courage to actually join before. This felt like the perfect moment to change that. My strategy was simple: become someone they couldn't ignore, someone with a voice that reached beyond their cruel little circle. The newspaper editor, Hannah Ross, welcomed me immediately with genuine warmth. She had bright red hair and infectious enthusiasm in her eyes. She asked what specifically brought me to the newspaper at this time. I told her honestly that I wanted to write about things that actually mattered to people. She smiled widely and said they desperately needed writers exactly like that. Through the newspaper, I gradually met other students who didn't fit into Tyler's narrow world of popularity and cruelty. Kevin Shaw, a quiet senior photographer with intense focus. Danielle Foster, a talented freshman writer who'd faced her own severe bullying experiences. These genuine people became my solid foundation when everything else felt unstable. We met after school regularly in the newspaper office, working together on stories and layouts and designs. They didn't know about the cafeteria incident at first. When they eventually found out through school gossip, they didn't pity me like others did. They actually respected that I'd kept working and moving forward anyway. For the first time in many months, I felt like I genuinely belonged somewhere safe. Meanwhile, I continued carefully observing Tyler's entire group, studying their patterns and weaknesses. I began noticing specific patterns in their behavior that revealed deep insecurities. Amanda constantly sought Tyler's approval for everything, carefully adjusting all her opinions to perfectly match his. Brandon tried desperately hard to be funny, performing constantly for attention and validation. Melissa mindlessly echoed whatever Amanda said, never expressing a single original thought of her own. Their so-called friendships seemed completely transactional, built entirely on maintaining social status rather than any genuine care for each other. Tyler himself proved particularly interesting to observe closely. He was undeniably cruel, yes, but also profoundly insecure underneath that confident exterior. He needed constant validation and attention from everyone around him. When people didn't laugh immediately at his jokes, his expression would tighten noticeably with anger. When someone else received attention or praise, he'd quickly find ways to redirect focus back to himself. His entire power base came directly from people's fear of becoming his next target. Everyone played along carefully to avoid being in his cruel spotlight. But what would happen if someone completely refused to play his game? I kept responding to all their mockery with unexpected friendliness and calm. It visibly frustrated them more each time. I started writing regularly for the school newspaper, pouring my experiences into words. My very first piece was titled, "The Performance We All Give." I wrote thoughtfully about identity, belonging, and the countless masks we wear to fit into society's expectations. I deliberately didn't mention anyone by name, but the underlying themes were crystal clear to anyone paying attention. Hannah loved it and published it prominently on the front page of our next issue. The response completely surprised me with its intensity. Students I'd never spoken to before approached me in hallways, genuinely thanking me for writing what they felt but couldn't express. One shy girl said she'd actually cried while reading it because it described her exact experience so perfectly. A quiet guy from my math class said it made him seriously rethink how he treated other people. Each meaningful conversation added important layers to my growing understanding of our school's social dynamics. I realized that many students felt trapped by rigid social expectations and hierarchies. They weren't actually happy in Tyler's world, but didn't know how to escape it safely. My honest words gave them permission to question things they'd accepted as unchangeable. Tyler definitely noticed my growing connections and influence. He absolutely didn't like it at all. He tried desperately escalating his tactics to regain control. He photoshopped my face onto various embarrassing images, a crying baby, a circus clown, a girl in an ugly dress, and posted them online for everyone to mock. Instead of hiding in shame like he expected, I shared them myself with clever captions that completely turned the joke around. When he posted me as a crying baby, I immediately reposted it with the caption, "Accurate representation of me watching my favorite show's finale last night." When he posted me as a clown, I wrote, "Finally found my Halloween costume. Thanks Tyler for the creative suggestion." People gradually started laughing with me instead of at him. This fundamental shift didn't happen overnight, but gradually, almost imperceptibly, the entire dynamic changed. Tyler's friends looked increasingly uncertain about everything. Brandon stopped trying to trip me in hallways. Melissa started avoiding direct eye contact whenever we passed. Even Amanda seemed noticeably less confident in her cruelty. The social hierarchy that had seemed absolutely permanent was actually starting to shift and crack. I could feel the power balance changing, and it was intoxicating. My second major article, "When Laughter Becomes a Weapon," went completely viral within our entire school community. I wrote carefully about bullying's underlying psychology without naming any specific names. How cruelty often masks deep personal insecurity. How silent bystanders enable abuse through their passive complicity. How victims can reclaim personal power through unexpected, strategic responses. Students began recognizing the specific patterns I described in vivid detail. Some of Tyler's peripheral friends started visibly distancing themselves, growing tired of the constant cruelty and negativity. The rigid social hierarchy that seemed completely permanent started actually shifting. By November, exactly 3 months after the initial cafeteria incident, something completely unexpected happened. The school administration announced a talent showcase fundraiser for the struggling arts program. Hannah immediately suggested I perform the exact monologue that had been mocked so cruelly. My stomach immediately dropped at the suggestion. The thought of standing on that stage voluntarily felt like deliberately volunteering for more public humiliation. But Hannah saw the situation completely differently than I did. She argued passionately that reclaiming that specific moment would demonstrate genuine strength, not weakness or desperation. Kevin immediately offered to help with professional lighting and videography for the performance. Danielle promised to write a compelling feature piece about facing your deepest fears. Their unwavering support made the seemingly impossible actually seem possible. I agreed cautiously, but only with significant modifications to the original plan. Instead of just performing the original monologue everyone had mocked, I wanted to create something much bigger and more meaningful. I spent 2 intensive weeks writing a completely new piece that incorporated spoken word poetry, the original monologue, and direct commentary on bullying's devastating impact. I called it Invisible Voices after careful consideration. I practiced every single night in my bedroom, then eventually in front of my entire family. Claire gave me valuable professional tips about stage presence and body language. My parents watched every practice run with obvious pride mixed with parental concern. The showcase was scheduled for early December. As the date approached steadily, anxiety completely consumed me. What if everyone just laughed again? What if I was giving them another perfect moment to mock endlessly? What if this entire plan backfired completely and made everything worse? My hands would shake during practice runs. My voice would crack at certain vulnerable moments. But each time, I pushed through, determined to reclaim this part of myself they had tried to destroy. The school auditorium filled completely with students, parents, teachers, and community members. I stood nervously backstage, heart pounding violently against my ribs. Tyler was definitely in the audience. I'd seen him enter confidently with Amanda on his arm. Part of me genuinely wondered if he'd deliberately disrupt my performance for attention. When my name was announced over the speakers, I walked slowly onto that brightly lit stage. The lights were intensely bright. I couldn't see individual faces clearly, which actually helped calm my nerves somewhat. I started speaking, letting my voice carry across the silent auditorium. My voice shook noticeably at first, then gradually steadied with growing confidence. I performed the original monologue first, deliberately letting vulnerability show through every word. Then I smoothly transitioned into new material, speaking passionately about pain, resilience, and consciously choosing how our own stories end. The auditorium stayed completely silent throughout. Not the mocking silence from before. This was engaged, respectful silence. When I finally finished, there was a brief pause. Then applause suddenly erupted like thunder. People stood up everywhere. Students, teachers, even some of Tyler's friends were clapping enthusiastically. After the performance ended, people immediately surrounded me from all directions. Students shared their own painful stories of bullying and isolation. Teachers thanked me sincerely for my courage and honesty. Parents shook my hand firmly, some with tears in their eyes. Tyler notably didn't approach me at all, but I saw him leaving early with Amanda following behind. His expression was completely unreadable from a distance. That single performance became a major turning point in everything. Principal Anderson called me to her office the very next week. She wanted to develop comprehensive anti-bullying initiatives and asked if I'd help lead them personally. I said yes without hesitation. We formed a diverse student committee to seriously address our school's toxic culture. Hannah, Kevin, and Danielle joined immediately without question. Surprisingly, other students joined too, some even from Tyler's former inner circle. They were genuinely tired of the constant cruelty and negativity. We spent many weeks developing concrete programs with real teeth, empathy workshops for all students, anonymous reporting systems that actually worked, comprehensive peer mediation training. The committee grew rapidly from 5 initial students to over 20 committed members. I found myself leading meetings, coordinating events, speaking with administrators. The girl who'd hidden in bathroom stalls just months ago was now shaping school policy. The transformation felt surreal. Meanwhile, Tyler's social status crumbled rapidly like a house of cards. His casual cruelty had been completely exposed, not through my direct attacks but through his own documented actions contrasted against my measured response. Students who feared him for years started finally speaking up about their experiences. Amanda broke up with him very publicly, loudly saying she couldn't be with someone so negative and toxic anymore. Brandon and Melissa quickly distanced themselves, no longer wanting to be publicly associated with him. Tyler became increasingly isolated, not actively bullied exactly, but completely irrelevant. He'd walk through hallways completely alone, the exact same way I once had. I didn't celebrate his fall from grace. I actually felt genuinely complicated about watching it happen. I definitely wanted him to face real consequences for his actions, but watching someone's entire world collapse wasn't nearly as satisfying as I'd originally imagined it would be. One quiet afternoon in January, Tyler approached me privately in an empty hallway. He looked physically smaller somehow, significantly less intimidating than before. He asked hesitantly if we could talk privately somewhere. We sat together in an empty classroom after school. Tyler visibly struggled to find the right words. Finally, he apologized directly and sincerely. He said that watching my performance had forced him to confront his own terrible behavior honestly. He'd been cruel primarily because he was deeply insecure, genuinely afraid of being vulnerable himself like I'd been. He didn't expect forgiveness from me, but he wanted me to know he was trying hard to change. I listened very carefully to everything he said. Part of me wanted to reject his apology completely, to remind him of all the pain he'd caused me. But another part recognized what seemed like genuine remorse in his voice. I told him honestly that apologies meant absolutely nothing without changed behavior over time. That if he truly wanted to be different, he needed to prove it through consistent actions. He nodded seriously, accepting that difficult truth. Before leaving, he asked hesitantly if there was anything he could do to help with the anti-bullying initiatives. I was surprised by the question. I said I'd think about it carefully. Over the following weeks, I watched Tyler from a distance. He stopped making cruel comments. He ate lunch alone quietly. He seemed genuinely humbled by his fall from power. Perhaps people really could change. In February, something completely unexpected happened that changed everything again. A prominent national youth organization focused on bullying prevention contacted Principal Anderson directly. They'd heard about our innovative initiatives and my performance through social media channels. They wanted to feature our school prominently in their nationwide campaign. They invited me personally to speak at their national conference in Chicago. The conference would bring together thousands of students from across the entire country. They'd cover all travel expenses and feature my story in their major anti-bullying campaign. I showed the email to my parents that evening at dinner. Their pride was overwhelming and obvious. My mom reminded me how far I'd come from that devastating Wednesday morning. My dad joked that I'd turned public humiliation into a legitimate career opportunity. Claire offered professional advice about public speaking and personal branding. Accepting this invitation meant stepping into a much larger role as an advocate. The conference would expose me to thousands of people. The responsibility felt enormous and overwhelming. But I'd learned something crucial through this entire journey. Purpose could transform pain into genuine power. Preparing for the national conference completely consumed my entire spring schedule. I worked closely with the organization's professional team to develop a presentation balancing personal narrative with actionable strategies. Hannah helped me refine my core message significantly. Kevin created supporting visual presentations with powerful imagery. The conference took place in Chicago during spring break. Walking into that massive convention center, seeing literally thousands of students everywhere, felt completely surreal. My presentation was scheduled for the second day. I spent the first day attending other sessions, hearing powerful stories from students nationwide. Each story reinforced how universal these experiences were. Bullying manifested differently across regions, cultures, and communities, but the emotional impact remained consistent. When my turn finally came, I stood before 3,000 people and shared my journey. I described the cafeteria humiliation, the decision to respond differently, the performance that changed everything. But I focused mostly on the aftermath, the workshops, the policy changes, the unexpected conversations. The audience's response exceeded anything I had experienced before. Students surrounded me afterward, sharing their stories, asking for advice, requesting photos. Some were crying, finally feeling understood. Flying home, I felt like a different person entirely than the girl who'd been mocked in that cafeteria months ago. Returning home from Chicago, I felt transformed and energized. But something fell off immediately. Hannah seemed distant, less enthusiastic about newspaper projects than usual. When I asked what was wrong, she initially deflected and changed the subject. Finally, she admitted something that shocked me completely. While I'd been in Chicago, Amanda had approached Hannah privately with a proposition. Amanda offered Hannah an exclusive interview about the truth behind Maya's Victim Act. She tried to convince Hannah that I'd manipulated everyone, that my whole transformation was calculated rather than genuine. Amanda had screenshots she claimed proved I'd planned everything for attention and fame. Hannah had refused the interview and defended me strongly, but she admitted that Amanda's manipulation attempt had genuinely shaken her. She started questioning whether my friendship with her was genuine or strategic. Her confession hurt deeply. After everything we built together, doubts had crept in. I understood Hannah's uncertainty, even though it stung badly. I asked to see Amanda's evidence myself. Hannah showed me screenshots Amanda had altered, taking my journal entries completely out of context to make planning look like manipulation. I explained to Hannah that yes, I had been strategic, but strategy didn't negate authenticity at all. I documented everything because I wanted to understand what was happening, not because I wanted to exploit it. I showed her my full journal, completely unedited. The pain and confusion were evident throughout every entry. Hannah apologized for doubting me. She felt terrible about letting Amanda's manipulation affect our friendship. I told her I understood completely. Amanda was desperate to reclaim relevance by discrediting me. This actually revealed how completely the dynamic had shifted. Amanda was now the one grasping for power. Amanda didn't stop with Hannah. She started spreading rumors that I'd only created the anti-bullying programs for college applications, that I didn't actually care about other students, that my whole transformation was performance art for attention. Some students believed her. I noticed whispers in hallways, skeptical looks. For a moment, I worried everything would unravel. But then something beautiful happened. Students I'd worked with in the anti-bullying committee spoke up. They shared their own experiences of me genuinely helping them. Danielle wrote an article about Amanda's manipulation tactics, drawing parallels to classic bullying behaviors. Kevin released a powerful photo series documenting our committee's work over many months. The evidence of sustained, genuine effort completely overwhelmed Amanda's narrative. Amanda's rumors died quickly. By March, she had become completely irrelevant. She transferred to another school in February, unable to handle how her social status had collapsed. Melissa and Brandon remained but had become much quieter, no longer seeking attention through cruelty. The friend group that once dominated school culture had dissolved entirely. Meanwhile, Tyler quietly worked on changing himself. He joined the peer mediation program, helping students resolve conflicts peacefully. He used his experience to explain the bully's perspective, helping others understand what drove cruelty. His transformation wasn't perfect. Old habits occasionally surfaced, but his genuine effort was undeniable. In April, Tyler asked if he could speak at our next anti-bullying assembly. I was hesitant but agreed. He stood before the school and took full accountability for his past behavior. He named specific people he'd hurt, including me. He explained how fear and insecurity had driven his cruelty. He encouraged others struggling with similar impulses to choose differently. The assembly proved powerful and moving. Several students approached Tyler afterward, sharing how his honesty helped them. I realized that redemption was possible when people did the difficult work. Chapter 21. The Complexity of Redemption, 250 words. Tyler's vulnerability was different from mine, shaped by guilt and shame rather than victimhood, but equally genuine. Some students remained skeptical of Tyler's transformation. They felt he didn't deserve redemption after everything he'd done. I understood both perspectives completely. Accountability and growth could coexist, though that balance remained complicated. The discussion itself was healthy, though. Our school was finally having conversations about nuance, about people's capacity to change. These conversations wouldn't have been possible before. In March, Principal Anderson announced that Riverside High would receive a state award for our anti-bullying initiatives. The recognition brought reporters to our school. They interviewed students, teachers, and administrators about the transformation. Several students, including Tyler, credited my performance as the catalyst. But I made sure to emphasize that real change required collective effort. During one interview, a reporter asked if I regretted the cafeteria incident. The question caught me off guard. After thinking carefully, I answered honestly. The humiliation had been genuinely painful, but it had launched me toward purpose I might never have discovered otherwise. I wouldn't recommend public humiliation as a growth path, but I'd learned to extract meaning from pain. The reporter asked about forgiveness next. I explained it was complicated and ongoing. I'd released the anger that had initially consumed me, not for their benefit but for my own peace. As junior year approached, I reflected on complete transformation. 15 months earlier, I'd been invisible Maya, desperately avoiding attention. Now I received messages from students nationwide, served on advisory boards, and spoke about social change. The external changes were significant, but internal shifts mattered more. I developed genuine confidence, independent of others' opinions. I learned that vulnerability could be strength when shared intentionally. I discovered purpose in helping others navigate pain I understood intimately. Hannah had been accepted to her dream college and would be leaving in the fall. Kevin had secured a prestigious photography scholarship. Danielle had won a national writing competition. We'd all grown tremendously, supporting each other through challenges. Our friendship had become the foundation I'd needed when everything else felt unstable. In May, the school held an assembly celebrating the year's achievements. Principal Anderson invited me to speak about the anti-bullying initiatives. Standing on that same auditorium stage where I performed months earlier felt like coming full circle. I looked out at the audience and saw so many faces that had been part of this journey. I spoke about collective responsibility and individual choice. I emphasized that culture change required everyone's participation, not just victims speaking up but bystanders intervening and perpetrators choosing differently. I thanked the students who'd supported the initiatives and challenged those who remained skeptical. The response was overwhelmingly positive. Students stood and applauded. Teachers wiped tears from their eyes. Principal Anderson shook my hand firmly. After the assembly, Tyler approached me privately backstage. He thanked me for not publicly destroying him when I easily could have. He acknowledged that my response had given him space to change. He said he was working on repairing relationships with others he'd hurt over the years. I appreciated his ongoing effort and told him so. Then Amanda appeared unexpectedly. She'd been invited to the assembly by a friend who still talked to her occasionally. She looked uncomfortable, completely out of place in a school that had moved on without her. She approached me hesitantly, clearly unsure of her reception. Unlike Tyler, she offered no apology whatsoever. Instead, she asked if I was happy now that I'd won against her. Her bitterness was obvious and ugly. I looked at her carefully, really studied her face. She seemed smaller, diminished by her own choices. I realized she was still trapped in the same competitive mindset that had driven her cruelty. I told Amanda honestly that I hadn't been trying to win anything at all. I'd been trying to survive, then to help others survive too. That she'd never understand because she still saw everything as competition. Her expression hardened defensively. She walked away without another word. I watched her leave, feeling absolutely nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, just complete neutrality. That's when I knew I'd truly moved past everything. Summer arrived, bringing valuable reflection time. I'd been invited to speak at 3 more conferences during the break. The youth organization wanted me to help develop curriculum materials. A publisher had contacted my parents about a potential book deal. The opportunities felt overwhelming for someone who just finished sophomore year. But I'd learned something crucial through this entire journey. My parents helped me navigate decisions, ensuring I maintained healthy balance. They reminded me that while advocacy was important, I was still a teenager who needed normal experiences too. Claire warned against burning out by accepting every opportunity. I listened to their wisdom carefully. I spent that summer speaking at conferences, working on curriculum development, and actually being a normal teenager. I hung out with Hannah, Kevin, and Danielle. We went to movies, played mini-golf, and had countless conversations about life. These friendships grounded me when everything else felt surreal. In quiet moments alone, I sometimes thought about that Wednesday morning when everything changed. The memory no longer carried the same sharp pain. Instead, it had become the origin story of purpose I discovered. The best response to humiliation wasn't revenge. It was becoming someone who helped others avoid that same pain. I'd learned that strength wasn't about never falling apart, it was about choosing how to rebuild yourself afterward. That vulnerability could be a superpower when wielded intentionally. That pain, while terrible in the moment, could become the catalyst for meaningful change. Tyler had taught me that even bullies were human, capable of growth when confronted with consequences. Amanda had shown me that some people never learn, too trapped in their own patterns to evolve. My friends had proven that genuine connection was worth more than any popularity. And I had discovered something essential about myself. I was not defined by the worst moment of my life, but by how I chose to rise from it. They laughed at my pain, so I turned it into power, and in doing so I found my voice. If this story resonated with you, I'd be grateful if you'd subscribe to this channel for more true stories like this one. Leave a comment below, telling me what you would have done in my situation. I read every single one. Share the story with someone who needs to hear it. Your share might save someone's life. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. I know this wasn't an easy story to hear, and I want to be honest with you. Some of the stories that follow contain fictionalized elements created for educational purposes. If that's not something you're comfortable with, Feel free to explore other content that suits you better. But if you're willing to learn from real experiences, even painful ones, I'll be here sharing what I've learned. God bless you. And remember, protecting what is yours is never an option.